When I think of Jesus, one of the things that he said is like, do we have eyes to see and ears to hear? And I think that's something that we've all got to be asking ourselves at such a time as this. You know, can we hear the cries of those who are hurting right now? Those in North Dakota, those in the Fergusons, in the Aleppos, in the all over our world that are really struggling right now. I'm thinking about the Good Samaritan story a lot these days, and the fact that a lot of people weren't attentive. They were oblivious. The religious people, the priest and the Levite, they passed by this brother that's beat up and left in the ditch. But the Samaritan is moved, and something's different about him, you know? And so I think we've got to be asking, what can sensitize us to the suffering of the world? What can give us the eyes to notice? And when I think of that, part of what I think we've got to do is we've got to allow ourselves to be interrupted by suffering and by injustice. When you read the Gospels, like half of them are written in the middle of interruptions. You know, Jesus is on his way somewhere and someone pulls on his shirt, you know, or says, hey, we ran out of wine at our wedding, or my son's sick, can you come to my house? And Jesus is constantly sidetracked, you know, he's like interrupted. And that's the very thing that we've worked out of our lives, you know, the space for interruption. We love our routines and, you know, schedules. And like the Good Samaritan story, people get beat up at really inconvenient times. You know, and I think we've got to allow ourselves to get derailed by the stuff that's going on, because that's where the gospel happens. You know, that's where life happens. Part of what we can do too, I think, is we can get rid of some of the noise and clutter and the stuff that, like, we live in such high-paced lives, and we're always connected to technology and Twitter and phones and you know, all these things. So I think part of what we can do is unplug some things so that we can have space for community and relationships and stuff like that. So there's a reason that in our neighborhood, like, we don't have TV generally, like, and kids come over to our house because we cook stuff and we paint walls and we, you know, like we do things together, we make stuff. So I think that's part of what we've got to make space for is community. Some of what makes us attentive is our location, is putting ourselves in places where we're not too distant from injustice. And nothing puts a fire in your bones like knowing people who are affected by racism and injustice and inequity. And so I think that we've got to be in proximity to the pain. For some folks, that's not a intellectual enterprise, like they're born into pain. But I think for others of us, everything in the world is teaching us to move away from the pain, to move away from streets where people get beat up or where there's people that don't look like us or whatever. And so I think we've got to keep moving ourselves towards those spaces. And then I find it impossible, if we're really sensitized to love, it's impossible not to respond when someone's mistreated or someone's getting evicted from their house, or you know, the issues choose us if we're near to the people. And so I think that's a big part of it. There's a lot of things we can do, I think, to work the muscles of compassion. Like this morning, I got up and ran 6 miles. I wasn't excited about that, I'm gonna be honest, you know, but like when I run, I start to feel myself breathe better, you know, and I feel myself getting healthier. And I think things like fasting and prayer, and some of those are like spiritual exercise. They're holy habits that actually begin to make us sensitive to what God is sensitive to see things that we might not have seen before, and to hunger for things because we're working out of that spiritual space. So like when you pray, when you have Sabbath day, when you do things like fast, I think those are working those muscles inside of us. So some of it's just the old school spiritual disciplines, you know, the things that these are tried and true. These are like push-ups and sit-ups, you know, they're things that are really good for our soul, and they help us become sensitive to the pains of the world.